Hi everyone and welcome along. This time of year is just magnificent for magnolia flowers, blooming all over the place. Now we have painted magnolia on the channel before, but today we're going to try a different type, the Magnolia Grandiflora, which is the beautiful white version. So grab your paints and let's get started. First we're going to do some drawing. So I've got a 6 by 8 inch piece of watercolour paper and I'm going to begin with the sort of rather sort of gnarly centre of my magnolia flower, and I am going to draw in some petals from it's a fairly open flower, but I will just have one petal that just sort of curls over like that to allow for another one coming out like this. I'm always thinking about that centre there. And for another curled over one. And we'll do one there. So just imagining them all coming from there. And we'll do a little sort of gnarly stem coming, well, it's a branch, isn't it? The branch just coming up and having these lovely, beautiful sort of bunny ear buds. Now, if you hate drawing, don't forget that what you can do is just do a pause the video, do a screen grab, and then you've got your line drawing. I'm trying to sort of draw quite heavily for you, and then we're going to do one flower that's not quite as open. So I start sort of with the base there, and we'll do a lovely sort of light bulb shape. And these bunny buds actually turn into fluffy little sepals, so we'll have one there, one just coming off like that. And that will be our drawing. So if you need to pause, screen grab, I'm now going to just lightly knock back the pencil with a putty rubber, so just make the pencil a little bit faint. So I've decided for this magnolia I want to create a surrounding background wash. So I've got buff titanium, yellow ochre, raw umber, moon glow I think will be really fun, and a bit of green gold as well I think would be nice. Now we have to be sort of a little bit nimble with our brush, creating washes around the edges of so much. So I've got my size 8 brush. I'm going to begin by painting in a wash of moon glow to the edge here, and then just getting a bit more water on the brush and coming right up to the edge here. You could use masking fluid, but I just like to try not to use it, to be honest. I don't know why I insist on that. Anyway, let's get some more colour in there, shall we? So I'm just dropping in other colours as I go, and the beauty of watercolour washes is even if you think at the time, oh gosh, that's quite a lot of colour I've just put in there, these things always dry lighter, so just try not to fuss too much, I think, with the colour you've got there. If anything, just help extend it round. Well, I think that looks absolutely lovely, and I'm really excited to get on with this. So we're going to start with our petals first. Now the photo references I've got, I can see the inside of the flower petals are very creamy white, but the outside you still do get the tiniest hint of pink. So I'm going to begin with my white petals, and I'm going to use buff titanium and the colours we were using for the background, because I want it all to sort of tie in, and I just think it looks so lovely. So I'm going to have Moon Glow ready here, but I want to warm it up a little bit, so I will put some burnt sienna in there. That's going to be our sort of deep shadow that we see. But I've got a size 8 brush here, and I'm just going to get some brand new fresh water because I want to make sure that this is as pure as possible and light and bright and nice, and it goes on. So let's start with some buff titanium, and I am going to start from the sort of the centre of the flower, and even with my size 8 brush I can get a lovely fine point there. I'm going to clean that off just with a clean wet brush, just extend some of those streaks, and now I'm going to go right down to a size 2, and I am going to introduce a tiny bit of Moon Glow to the edge of this petal. So both sides there, just curling over. Clean my brush off once again and just draw a very sort of minimal amount of colour in, and I really want to make the most of having that unpainted space there. Now this colour here, which was the burnt sienna with the Moon Glow, I want to bring up the top here. Just have it coming out from that centre. So that is how we're going to paint these flower petals. I'm going to sort of try and paint ones that don't touch each other too immediately. This one should be okay. So starting off with buff titanium, getting that there, and then sort of the light hits it as it unfurls here, so we'll just finish off with a little bit of Moon Glow on the outer tip, and then clean off the brush and just blend it into the petal. But what's so great about this technique is because we have the wash on the outer edge, it means that we don't have to put too much on our petal to help it stand out. And I will just pop a little, they do have these sort of creases down the middle of them, so a tiny bit of yellow ochre, it's that very faint middle, and then just a little bit of that coming out from there, and we're just going to keep going round each petal. And of course there are going to be times where we see a lot more shadow, the ones sort of curled over, so I'll have a go at this one here, starting with buff titanium. In fact, yeah, we'll start with buff titanium. Can you hear the rain? It's not very spring-like. So I fill in this underside with the buff titanium, and I'm going to take that shadowy Moon Glow burnt sienna mix and go straight in with it first here, and then just some more pure Moon Glow to really contrast with the white petal that's over the top. Now I need to wait for this to dry to put that in. So I'm just going to work my way around building up these petals, and then we'll go to the next stage. Now I've got all the petals coloured in. I was reluctant to say coloured in, but you know what I mean. I'm now going to do these two bits that are just curling over. These are the bits that are going to have the light on them the most. So I've just got buff titanium, and I'm going to sort of start on the curled over part. And I'm going to sort of imagine that kind of action of it coming over the top like that, and then a little bit of moon glow just a little bit. Now let's do it again. So a bit of buff titanium. I think the more unpainted white space you can leave, I think the better. But you do want a little bit just to help create these 3D effects. And I think I'm happy with that one. So we're going to move up to our petal here, and I'm going to move this away because it's so delicate, a little bit of pink, and I think alizarin crimson. Oh, I said it right the other day, alizarin crimson, because a very clever lady on the comments said think about lizard. So you might sometimes hear me say it right. Alizarin. Anyway, here we are. So I've got my alizarin crimson ready, and I'm going to use buff titanium once again, and I'll start with this main petal. Don't want too much colour there. Now you do need to be mindful of thinking about where the petal's edge is if you haven't drawn it all in. So I want just a little bit of moon glow on the edge, on the edges there. And a little bit of the brown down the bottom there. And then I think with my size 2 brush, I want to get a very, very minimal amount on the brush. Let's place it in there. And then just send it up a little bit. And when that's had time to dry a little bit more, I'm going to do, in the way that I did a yellow ochre, slightly more defined line up there, I'm going to put in a alizarin crimson one too. So in the same way, we just want to work on each petal, but making sure it is not touching its neighbour whilst it's still wet. We'll just paint all of these in too. So buff titanium first, a little bit of moon glow, and then a very little bit of alizarin crimson. I feel like some people will be sad if I start to pronounce it right, so I promise it won't be too often. So let's get the centre of this flower started to be painted in. So it's a lovely kind of golden orangey colour, so a mixture of yellow ochre and cadmium orange will do it. And I'm going to begin with my size 0 brush, placing in little curves sort of coming from the middle. And they're sort of angling slightly off in that direction. Lots of little loops almost. And it's always easiest to start in the middle and then work your way outwards, and I'm just using a slightly more concentrated colour towards the outer edges, just so it shows up against that darker petal colour. Right, it's time to look at the little buds, little fluffy bunny buds. I want some green gold, some sap green, what's that? Payne's grey, not sap green, goodness me. Green gold and Payne's grey. And that makes a fantastic colour to match in with some brown tones. We want a sort of golden green, and even though I have a colour called green gold, it's not quite right. So I'm starting with some yellow ochre, and I'll just paint a sort of a complete one first, one that hasn't opened up. So starting with some dilute yellow ochre. I'm now going to come in with my Payne's grey green gold mix around the edges. And then I'm going to get some Payne's grey into the yellow ochre, and I just want to dab it in because they're velvety, these things. They're really lovely and fluffy, and I think just by dabbing in some of that colour we get that effect. So the next stage is to get the branch in, and it's a beautiful dark wood colour. So I'm going to combine burnt sienna, Payne's grey, and the secret ingredient, alizarin crimson. It just makes it a really rich, deep colour. And it's quite knobbly though, and these colours will still be rather useful. If I paint in down here, so I've got size 2 brush. And even though it's quite a sort of solid colour, what I'm doing is I'm just building up this texture slowly, because even though there's a lot of darkness, we want a hint of shine as well, and low light and highlight. So if I get some neat Payne's grey, that emphasises the dark element of the wood. And then if I take some of this brown with the moon glow that we had from earlier and just use it to create that sort of lighter side of the branch. We get ourselves a lovely sort of interestingly textured and gnarly branch. Right, I'm so pleased with that, and I couldn't resist just adding in an extra little bud here and there. So to finish off, we just need to get a little bit more detail on the inside of our flower here. So I've got the Moonglow Burnt Sienna shadow to begin with, and what I'm going to do is just add this little extra curve of shadow around the sort of bottom half to start off with anyway. We'll see how it looks and if it needs anything more. And I'll just add a little bit of Payne's grey in there, maybe a little bit more sort of solid moon glow as well, just a bit more darkness. And there we go, and we'll just get a tiny bit of a bleed. just with a wet brush, I'm just dabbing, spreading that colour around a little bit. And then with a highlight, because every low light needs a highlight, so then I'm going to come in with my orange and just pick that up like that. And I feel like the only thing left to do is just a tiny bit more shadow sort of in underneath the petals there. And I'm just doing that with my size 0 brush, and then I can clean it off afterwards. Essentially, the last sort of parts of any watercolour painting are just seeing where you can accentuate some of the contrasts that you may have painted in earlier that may have faded with the passing of time and the colours lightening. But I think that's really lovely, so I'm going to say that is done. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed that and enjoyed painting another lovely spring flower. I want to say a huge thank you to everyone for watching, in particular my patrons who continue to support me every day. And if you would like to subscribe to the channel to make sure you never miss another video, just hit the little subscribe button and the notification bell, and we'll see you again next time. Okay, bye!